Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Rachel Cush, and today I'm talking about exclusively pumping when you have to go on vacation or a work trip, or you're just going to be away from home for extended amount of time. So one of the things that I was really worried about on my breastfeeding journey and my pumping journey was what I was going to do if I was away from home. And a little bit of it is like that daunting, like, how am I going to fly with breast milk? How am I going to pump on a schedule? Um, I ended up following several moms who were exclusively pumping and also had work trips coming up, kind of took a little bit ideas from each one of them and made it work for myself. So, one of the biggest things that I'm going to share with you is like the actual stuff I took because I think it made a big difference to be prepared. Um, as well as the kind of the thing that I thought would be the hardest, which was flying with breast milk, was actually one of the easiest. So uh, I'm going to start by what I did ahead of time, and that was to pump extra. Every single day, I pumped a little bit extra. I added one extra pump for the 30 days leading up to my trip. My trip was 4 days. I had to fly. And at that point, I was pumping 6 to 7 times a day. I changed my pump schedule to 7 to 8 times a day and froze the milk from the last pump of the day and put it in the freezer. That way, I had 30 packets of milk that was frozen. Because it was only like the last pump of the day, it tended to be a very low amount. And so it wasn't these big bags of milk, but with 30 of them, there was enough for 4 days for the boys for my husband to unfreeze for the boys so that they could have breast milk. Um, Again, these weren't giant bags of milk. These were, like I said, last pump of the day, lower in ounces than the normal pumps. But over the course of a month, I wasn't stressed out with trying to like fill these big bags of milk like a week before I left. And so I'm really happy that I started way ahead of time with freezing it, because if there was a day that I didn't get that extra pump in, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I only have 3 more days before I leave. I have to pump. And so it kind of took a little bit of the pressure off. That being said, I froze a ton of milk and then I made sure to pack everything I needed for the trip. So, one of the things that I'm extremely grateful for are these LV breast pumps. Hopefully, these will be in focus. These are rechargeable, they go right into your shirt. I have a full review on these that I can leave a link below so you can see like how they work. But basically, they're rechargeable, they fit in my purse, I can pump as I'm walking around. And so I was going to a conference and I knew that these would be the only pump I was taking. I didn't bring my plug-in pump. Sometimes at conferences, I don't go back to my room more than every like 4 to 5 hours, if that, like if I have to run and grab something. So I knew that I wanted something to be, I wanted the most portable option. If I didn't have this pump, I would have had to schedule going back to my room 3 to 4 times a day, at least 3 times during the actual conference, 4 to 5 if I count from breakfast to when I went back to bed. The second thing I took with me on this trip was these lactation massagers, and they're warming massagers. So I've talked in the past about being comfortable while pumping to get the best output. When you're traveling, you tend to be stressed. I knew I was going to feel stressed being away from the boys. They were only 4.5 months old, and so it was my first time being away from them, besides my initial hospital stay where I was held back and the boys went home before me. So it was a little bit stressful. It kind of made me feel like I did back then when I was kind of separated from them. And so I knew with the stress levels that maybe my output wouldn't be as great. Flying also can be stressful. Traveling, luckily it was in the same time zone, but staying in a different, uh, place than you usually sleep, being on a really weird schedule. It just all those things, not eating your normal food. So I didn't want to come and get into a situation where maybe I got a clogged milk duct, or I wasn't getting as good of out pump with pumping because of stress. So I brought these with me. They're really small. They use the same chargers as my LV pump. So I brought just one set of chargers for all four of these. These hold a charge pretty long, so I didn't have to plug these in a ton. And I actually only needed to use them I think once or twice when at the end of the night I was just feeling like really stressed. I just popped these on and turned them on the warmer and to help me relax while I was pumping, like at the end of the day. The last tool that I brought with me was my hand pump. I brought this because sometimes, like when I'm rushing and walking around a lot, like I knew I would be at the conference and I'm not sitting still while pumping. Um, I don't always get the best pumps, especially like if I'm power walking, which I was doing a lot at the conference between each of like the sessions. So I brought the hand pump just to make sure that several times a day I was doing a really good empty after a pump to make sure the breasts were really emptied out. So I only ended up using this at night, right before I went to bed. Um, and I think the morning before I flew, I used this as well, just to make sure my breasts were super like drained. Because the flight is long and I was unsure about how I wanted to clean out my pump if I pumped on the plane in the little plane bathroom. So I just made sure the breast was really empty before I got on the flight. So I didn't have to pump again until after I was off of the flight. Um, so basically, this was my pumping supplies. And this is actually fit into a bag smaller than what my Spectra pump would have, uh, fit into. So even though it seems like a lot of stuff, I just put it in one bag together with the charger and was able to travel with this pretty compactly. I also brought just like a plethora of these milk bags and a Sharpie so that I could write the dates and times that I pumped on all the bags as I was going. I knew that with toting them back to with me on the plane that they were going to get jumbled up. And so I just made sure to label these really well. Our hotel had a refrigerator in it. It didn't have a freezer, but it had a refrigerator. And so I was able to store all my milk there. And then this guy. This is a freezer bag lunchbox. So what it is there's like freezable material in the base and on the sides of this. You can put this in a freezer and it'll freeze solid and it'll keep whatever you have in here very cold for a long time. Even though I didn't freeze it, I did put this in the refrigerator before I traveled. And this, I froze it. I'm pretty sure. No, it didn't really get frozen. It does get like stiff when it's cold. So I want to say it kind of felt frozen, but it just was really cold when I did this. And then I put a little bag of ice from the ice maker in the hall in a big Ziploc bag and added it in there with my breast milk. The plane ride was only an hour. I think if it had been longer, I would have asked the hotel to freeze this. And they actually said that they could do that for me before I left. I just didn't need it. But I brought this with me. I was able to put this in my work bag as I was walking around pumping. I would go to the bathroom, wipe the pumps out, fill the milk bags, and then pop it right into the cooler so that during the day, the breast milk stayed cold until I could run it upstairs to the refrigerator. And as you can see, this is quite a big bag, so you're able to just put everything that I needed right into this cooler and keep it all in one place. And it was, I want to say it's like no big deal, but it was really great to just have this like one bag full of my breastfeeding stuff to go. So that is how I pumped while I was gone and what I took with me. How I got my breast milk onto the airplane. So I made sure all the bags were really well sealed. I had the bag of ice in here that I dumped out before I went through. So I kept the bag cold with ice. Till we got to the airport. Right before we went through security, I dumped the bag of ice so that the Ziploc was empty and dried out, and it was just the breast milk. I went through security. I let them know that I had breast milk, so they pulled it to the side. There were only several bags, and I want to say if the bags had less than 6 ounces of liquid in it, they didn't have to scan them. I can't be sure, but there was like a certain allowance where I saw her like measuring them, and it seemed like the really full bags, like a little bit above 6 ounces, were the ones that she had to like open and wave this like sensor strip over. They do it with clean hands. They do it with gloves on. I had a chance to wash my hands so that I could help them. So it stayed sterile. But she did let me know that if it had been frozen, that they wouldn't have actually had to open it and test it. So knowing that for next time, I will probably take as much of the breast milk down to the hotel concierge and have them freeze it in this bag. That way, when it go through security, I can either have only like one or two bags of milk that I had obviously just pumped from that morning, that they would have to check out. So it might have been a little quicker, but really no hassle. They were super kind about it, really sympathetic, and wanted to make sure that I knew that they cared about the cleanliness of the milk that I was taking home. And so it was a lot. It was a lot better experience than I thought I was going to have. I had heard some horror stories about people who they felt people weren't careful with the milk as they were testing it, or gave them a hard time about it. But that was not my experience. I'm really appreciative of the people who helped take care of me on the trip for that. So that's what I took with me. That's how I got the breast milk back. As soon as I got through security, I went to a Starbucks. I got myself a coffee and I asked them for a bag of ice and then just popped a bag of ice back into this cooler, zipped it up, and the breast milk stayed really cold until I got home. And I obviously then put it in the refrigerator and used it in the next day. Well, obviously over the next 3 days for the boys. The last thing that I will say, on top of like bringing the things that you need to pump comfortably, something to tote it around and get it home with, um, is to bring a water bottle. At the conference, they had like little water stations here and there, but I found that I tend to get dehydrated when I'm on vacation. Just drinking water is the last thing that I think about, on top of the fact that I hate using public bathrooms, obviously. I don't know. They just feel very germy to me. Obviously, you just have to do what you have to do, but I find that I am not just chugging water and having to pee every 5 minutes, like if I can avoid it. However, when you're breastfeeding, that's just not a great idea to let yourself get dehydrated. You don't want your body to have to pull from its reserves because you're not meeting its needs. And so, it won't short the breast milk, right? Like it'll take it from you. So I carried a large water bottle with me throughout the conference, um, helped me stay hydrated. The first day I wasn't as hydrated. The second day I was super hydrated. I felt parched when I woke up. Maybe it was from flying, maybe it was just from, being busy throughout the day and not drinking as much. Whatever it was, I made up for it. And so the rest of the conference, I made sure to drink a lot of water. Also, if you're going to be drinking on vacation, just remember to time your pumps. Try to pump right before you have a drink or two, and then give yourself that 3 to 4 hour window if you're allowed, if you can. Um, if you have to pump sooner for comfort, you obviously will have to dump the breast milk. But if you've only had one drink and it's been 2 hours, as long as it's like you feel, I think they say if you feel good enough to drive, you can pump. But basically, this means like you haven't had more than one drink in an hour and you've let enough time pass that it can get out of your system. So stay hydrated, take a water bottle with you, or make sure that there's a place that you can drink plenty of water. I think that really helped. And I definitely realized that me waking up uh, every 3 to 4 hours with the boys at night does affect my supply, because one of the nights I slept 5 hours in a row and my output that morning was really, really high, exponentially high compared to just the extra hour that I hadn't pumped. So that was kind of cool. I think as the boys get older and I sleep better, I should have a better time pumping. Obviously, not getting sleep is stress on your body. And so I definitely think it affects how much milk you produce. But, anyways, one last thing I wanted to talk about. I didn't use this, but other people recommended it. It is called Milk Stork. I think if you produce a ton of breast milk, more than you could take home in a container, if you're gone for multiple days, like more than 3 or 4, and you couldn't fit all the milk you pump into a small container, Milk Stork actually ships the container to your hotel. You pump, you then pack this postage box. You like break apart this cool pack, put it on top of your milk, and they overnight it back to your house, so that when you're on vacation, you have a lot of milk to ship back. You don't have to worry about it spoiling if you have a really long plane trip. You don't have to worry about struggling through security with it. Uh, it was more on the expensive side, I think, for the small box to ship it back to you. With the box, with the shipping to the hotel and then shipping it back, I think the whole thing was between like $80 and $120. I think it's closer to 150 for the larger box. So if you produce a lot of milk, it can get a little more expensive, but I think it's really good for people who have long plane rides, maybe don't want to hassle with dragging the milk back and forth, and also maybe who will be gone for a longer amount of time. So they want that milk to get back home so that it can be used by their baby. So that's something to look into. I'll link that below as well. I think it's important just to have options. If you can do what I did and bring yourself a really quality cooler, they even have small coolers that are watertight that you can fill with ice and don't have to put in a Ziploc bag. I didn't look into that because we just don't have one. The one I do have was like pretty big, and I knew I didn't want to travel with anything that large. So, yeah, those are the options that you have. I think that you can make it work for you. My suggestion is to start prepping for pumping for vacation earlier than later so you don't feel rushed, you don't feel stressed, because obviously stress is not your friend when you're trying to breastfeed and when you're trying to pump. So, if you guys are planning on going on vacation or you're going to be away from your baby for a long time, what do you do to prep for it, and how do you travel with breast milk? I'm always curious to see how other people are doing it. And of course, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and I'll do more on my exclusively pumping journey now that that's where we're at with the twins. Bye, guys. Thank you.